wanted to go ahead and make this short little video to help explain what is going to be the major components of this project that we're going to be working through in regards to mass extinctions. Now, of course, the main goal is you're going to be teaching a middle schooler about mass extinctions and some of the evidence associated with them, and some of the more challenging topics that might take you a little bit of time to understand and figure out before you kind of present it in a way that's more easily understood by a younger audience. So the project has three main components. Um, Now, in terms of your working through these components, you can choose whether you'd like to work individually or if you'd like to work in partners. Whichever, it does not matter to me whatsoever. There is a Google form that needs to be completed in the assignment instructions with an associated due date for when you need to submit that for if you'd like to get partners. And that's just so that I can actually assign you and your partner the same assignment through Blend. So please be sure that you complete that as necessary, and ensure that if you are choosing partners, that you have an equal collaboration between the two of you as you're analyzing and creating your products. And there'll be some hints along the way as we go through these instructions. So the first step that you're going to do, part one, is becoming an expert, and becoming an expert on one of your chosen mass extinctions. So there are the big five mass extinctions: Cretaceous, Devonian, Ordovician, Triassic, and Permian. You can choose whichever one you would like. It does not matter to us. Once you have decided which one you want to investigate further, you're going to see that there is a research library available on Blend, and it's in this module. Once you click it, you'll see a folder indicating each of the five mass extinctions. If you go inside there, you're also going to see another folder that says articles, and this is articles that Planet Earth teachers have pulled that are full articles, not just abstracts that you have access to, um, in regards to different evidence, different studies on pieces associated with each of those five big mass extinctions. So pay attention to those as you're working through the research library. Now, of course, you have some time and you don't have to settle on, like, if you pick one Extinction, Devonian, and you look through the articles and you're like, I really don't feel any of these, you can switch that. You just need to switch it before you complete part one, right? Because you need to know an expert. So feel free to kind of browse through any of the folders as you see necessary. And then you're going to choose one of the articles. Be sure that you choose an article that interests you, because we're only having you choose a single article because we want you to be an expert on that article. I don't want you to, a lot of students a lot of times get hung up on like citing 20 different articles or research studies and not knowing as much about each of them, but kind of the surface level understanding. We want you to get a deep understanding of the actual article, so we only want you to choose one that you're going to actually become an expert on. And there's going to be some terminology in there that you might not understand. There might be methods in there that you don't understand. And that's part of your goal of working through that, is to gain a better understanding of what they actually are. So that's what you're going to be doing as part of becoming an expert. Again, as you're reading through those articles, it's a scientific article, so you don't have to read it in as it is presented. I always highly suggest read that abstract. Do you really like it? If you get past the abstract, go ahead and start reading about the conclusion or the introduction, whichever. So then you get a little bit of basis on what they're looking at, what they decided to study, before you kind of jump into methods or results. Once you've finished reading that first article, you're going to provide some proof of evidence that you're an expert. And there's really any means that you might show us that you're an evidence that you are an expert on your article. It might include notes over the entire article. It might be where you've taken notes, but you've highlighted words or topics that you didn't understand. You created a questions list that you needed to investigate, and you've investigated them. It might be a chart where you're connecting ideas between them, but it should show a depth of understanding, right? It shouldn't just be a surface level understanding. It should demonstrate that you understand the evidence, what they went through to create it. Please make sure, if you are working with partners, this includes a discussion of the article. So you'll have some evidence of you two, whether you're taking notes on that discussion or creating something to keep track of. But I also want you to include some type of video of you discussing the article together, because that's part of the point of collaboration. We want to see that you're working through the ideas together to figure out what's going on. Now, that does not have to be anything formal. It could just be a Zoom meeting between the two of you that you've recorded and submitted to me. In addition, please make sure that you include the name of your article If you want to upload the PDF of your article so that it's available to me, easy access, that's great too, or a link to it. Awesome. But at least give me the name of it and the extinction so that I can access it when reviewing your evidences as an expert. And that is part one. Part two is you need to take, now you've become an expert on your article, but now you need to figure out what do I need to understand about the article and how can I break that understanding down in terms of a younger audience. So an example might be, for example, if I'm thinking about calculus, right? So if I think about me as the teacher, you as the student, and I have a middle schooler, our conceptual understanding of calculus can be very dramatically different. As a teacher, right, I've had exposure to a lot of abstract theories, concepts, and a background in mathematics. So for me, when you're talking about something calculus related, it's probably going to make relative sense to me to a point, of course, but I'll be able to pull some of my background knowledge to help me understand what you're presenting to me. For you, it really is dependent upon what classes you've taken. Some of you might be in calculus right now, some of you might just be in pre-calc, some of you might not be in either of those. And that's okay. It just means that you don't have necessarily all that background knowledge that's going to make understanding easier. So you're going to need different supports than me as the teacher. Same thing for the middle schooler. As a middle schooler, abstract concepts are very challenging for young audiences to understand, which is why calculus is tricky. They can understand, right, multiplication, algebra a little bit, but once you reach those point where I'm beginning to deal with abstract concepts, that's when it gets much more challenging. So what we want you to be thinking about is your article. You have an understanding of the article, I have an understanding of the article, but you have to figure out how can you make it understandable by a middle schooler because some of the concepts are going to be too big for them. That doesn't mean that you need to dumb it down. You can still teach them what it is, but you need to come about it from a different way and add in support so that they can understand it. Um, for example, so thinking about the article in chunks of understanding. So you want to be sure that you're using language that they understand. Don't assume that like, for example, we've already been exposed to several concepts around geology, right? As students, right? Most of you know the three types of rocks, you know, like an understanding of kind of how rocks are made and stuff like that. That's background knowledge that helps you in my course. A middle schooler isn't going to always have all those background information, so you're going to need to think through what information they need to have and how can you provide it so they can understand it. Another example might be if I'm trying to understand the that should say dissociation. That's why it's in quotes, dissolving salt in water, right? So as a high school scientist, right, you should know that it's not dissolving salt, it's the dissociation of salt and water. And that's a good point, right? So as a misconception as we begin to think it's dissolving, but that language has connotations associated with it that we need to pay attention to. We also have to understand that salt is made up of two elements, right? That's why it's allowed to be able to dissociate into Na and Cl. It's allowed to do that because it's an ionic compound. It's composed of charges that allow it to be able to dissociate in water and creates a solution. And why are they allowed to surround water? Well, that's because of polarity of water. And you can see that just this simple concept, right, of me dissolving salt in water is made up of a bunch of abstract ideas that come together to make this understood. Now, just like you as a high school student, before this class, you wouldn't have known all of these things and you wouldn't have been able to reach the understanding that I wanted you to. So I have to make sure that you have the supports to fill in the gaps before we try to explain that phenomenon, or I provide you some of that material. So make sure that as part two, you're taking apart this main essence of the article and breaking it into pieces so that you know what supports the students need. Your last piece is putting it all together and illustrating all of this information to your middle school students. The way that you do this is really completely up to you. It might be a digital product that you've made, whether that's like some type of anchor chart, graphic chart. There's a Padlet with a bunch of resources that you can do. It might be a non-digital product. It might be a painting and a 3D product, a 3D printed product, something to show. That you're modeling something, depending on what, it really depends on what your article is about, which might make more sense on which one you choose. It might just be a presentation that you're giving the students, very much like we might do at a conference, right? Give a short little presentation that's interactive and has that structural support available to it, or it might be something else that I'm not thinking of that you're more than happy to utilize as well. The one key piece though with all options, no matter which product you make, each product must include a 2 to 4 minute audio explanation that shows me your depth of understanding and how you're going to take the information that you provided in your illustration and teach the middle school students. Because it's all great if there's points on a PowerPoint, right, or a model, but I need to know how are you going to use that model to teach the students a concept. And that should be roughly 2 to 4 minutes. If you audio, if you want to make it a video, you're more than happy to. I'm only saying audio as a rough because I know some students don't want to do the video, which is fine. If you are partners, that video should include both of you contributing equally. Now, the way you submit your product will really depend on which one you've chosen. If it's a digital, some type of link access to me, non-digital, you can upload images. Just ensure that if you created something or a product that I can actually see the detail that you've put into it and what you're submitting to me as I'm grading your project, because the presentation of your final submission is your largest point um, in terms of the project as a whole. Again, remembering that both partners are contributing equally in how you're explaining it. But you really have a lot of flexibility in your choice in how you present it. But that is the project that we are going to be doing this week. So part one, again, becoming an expert. You're going to read the article, become an expert on that article. Part two, breaking down the concepts so that you can figure out what supports need to be in place to support your middle school audience. Part three, you're going to create the product and include some audio explanation of you presenting it so that they can learn this fantastic new thing that you found in your research article. Of course, all of these slides are available in the assignment instructions. So you're more than happy to glance back on them or watch this video as many times as you need. And I will also be available for any support that you need. Otherwise, please let me know if you have any questions, and good luck, and I look forward to listening to your audio explanation.